Well, that doesn't sound good. Hey everybody, happy day that ends in a Y, wherever you're watching this from. If you have ever had a problem with your Shop Vac making a weird noise, there's a pretty good chance that the motor inside of it just needs to be lubricated a little bit. If you're thinking about, should I fix it or should I throw it away, we're gonna show you something that's pretty easy to try, and I would definitely say it's worth trying before you toss that sucker. So stay tuned. Shop Vac repair coming right up. Alright guys, so like I mentioned, this is going to be a pretty easy thing to check out. It's an easy fix, and it's definitely worth checking if you're having any kind of noise problems coming out of your Shop Vac. At some point they do dry out a little bit and they need a little bit of lubrication. So here's what you're going to need. Let's take a look. So number one, like I had previously mentioned, we're going to need a few tools. Let's start with the gloves. The fan or the blower motor inside those can be pretty sharp, so it's just a pretty good idea to have some gloves on. Up to you, but I recommend it. You're going to need some wrenches. In my case, it was a 1/2 inch standard, but your mileage may vary depending on the brand and size of your Shop Vac. You're going to need a Phillips driver probably, and you're probably also going to need either a socket set or, in my case, I'm using cautiously a power tool to remove those sockets. Either one will be fine. You're also going to need something to lubricate the motor when we get it apart. I'm using 3-in-1, but that's up to you. And then just something to clean up your mess in case you make one. Cold snack optional, but highly recommended. Gloves, as we mentioned earlier. And then you're going to need a way to blow or clean off the actual fan and filter inside the vac, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I've got a compressor out here, but you can definitely use a can of compressed air. So let's get this sucker apart and let's take a look. All right, so step one, make sure it's unplugged. Always, always, always goes without saying, but I'm going to be Captain Obvious for a second so that nobody gets electrocuted. All right, let's pop this thing open. In my case, there's just one release. I'm going to set the entire dustbin aside. We won't need that for now. And if it's a wet dry vac like this one is, there's actually two components to the filter assembly. The first one is this paper cover, and then the second is this foam filter, and we're going to set both of those aside. I would recommend that you get your air, and if yours isn't clean, you blow it off. These are reusable. And then this is the filter that you would actually use for wet applications. We're going to set that aside also. And again, you're going to want to blow that off once it's detached from the vac itself. But I've already done that, so we're going to get to it later. All right, now before we take this thing apart, let's just go ahead and clean it off a little bit. This is actually a tip over safety, so we just want to make sure that we don't get rid of that. It's going to go right back in its spot. We're just going to clean that guy off a little bit, and I'm going to go grab a couple tools. Okay, I've got 4 screws here. Now these are hex head bolts that I'm going to take off first. Be careful if you're using a power tool not to overdo it. This is plastic that we're working with, and you can easily break it. Even if yours is not plastic, still be careful. Okay, we've got those 4 things off. Just going to lift that assembly off, and I'm going to take my tip over ball and set it aside. And this is what we're left with, okay? In my case, it's a 1.5 horsepower, but yours may be bigger or smaller. And we're gonna look for screws in here. Now on mine, this piece actually just pulls out. like that, okay? And I'm gonna set this top piece aside. And I can see now the motor in here. We're getting to that. It's actually magnetic, and I'll show you how that works here in just a minute. But we've got to start pulling apart things. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do here is this plastic piece on the bottom literally just sits on 4 tabs, and on 3 tabs, and it just pulls out. And this is our blower or our fan motor. And it's pretty amazing that this thing creates as much suction as it does with just that little thin blade. Now this is going to be probably sharp, so be careful, right? This is why I'm wearing gloves. Next, I'm going to take, in my case, a 1/2 inch wrench. I'm going to hold this, being careful not to bend, because this is aluminum and it will bend. And just pop it loose. It's probably going to be tight, it might be rusted. Again, good use of the gloves there. We're going to take that off, set it aside. Now, careful not to lose the washer. This is actually a good area for a light oiling. When we start to put it back together, we'll come back to that in a minute. As is this area underneath. We're going to save that washer. Now I've got 2 screws here, one here and one here. I'm going to take those loose, and I'm also going to have to take loose this screw right here that holds the power cord in place. Pull that part off, set it aside, and now we've got our motor here. All right, so this works on magnets. It's electromagnet. There are actually 2 magnets. I'm not sure if you can see in there. I've got one on each side. When you put power through this thing, it's going to send a charge, which is going to make those magnets spin pretty quickly. All right, and I can turn that by hand so it's not completely seized up. So now, where do we lubricate? All right, a couple different places. First of all, right here at the top. Okay, I'm going to put a drop of oil down there. I'm also going to blow this thing out before I do that, just to make sure that there's no big chunks of dirt that got trapped in there. All right, as long as the magnet itself looks good here, you do not want to put any oil on that area. That needs to stay completely dry. And you also want to make sure that you don't oversaturate this top area to put too much oil into it. And this sounds and feels pretty good. I'm able to spin it freely, so I feel like some minor lubrication will do me justice. Now this next part's a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. Let me get this up on the bench here. I'll show you. Okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get access to the area underneath this cover. So in my case, I've got a little stop right here, and I'm just going to gently pull, and it'll pop right out. Okay, don't need to unplug any of this, but again, make sure before you attempt this, this thing is not plugged in to power. Now I've got a lot of rust down in here. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but in that area, on this shaft, on this pin, all through here, and that is most likely what is making the rubbing noise. So we're going to lubricate that. Couple drops of oil, don't overdo it. Okay, so I put oil in this area right here, and also this area right here. Now there's a little bit of play here. You can see that I'm able to slide this up and down or to pull it, and that helps me get oil in, and it's also going to let me spin this to distribute that oil. Okay, now we just put everything back together in reverse order. So I'm going to put my washer back. right there. Actually, this goes on first and then I put the washer on. Sorry guys. Just testing to make sure you're paying attention. All right, now we put our washer back on. We're gonna put 3 screws back in here. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, now, before I put this fan motor back on or this blower assembly, I'm gonna do a couple things. First of all, we'll set that guy on there, all right? And I'm just gonna put a thin coat of oil or lubricant right on this. And to do that, I'm just gonna set it right there. And I'm just gonna put just a little drop. And then roll it around, wipe it around just a little bit. Just to make sure it's just got a thin layer. And then I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. And I can see that it's got a little bit of rust on it, so it's not a bad idea. It'll help inhibit that. All right, there we go. Now when you tighten this nut, it doesn't need to be over torqued. Just hand tight. If you make it too tight, you're going to crush this aluminum piece. That's it. All right, from there, put our top cover back on. And our bottom cover now, in my case, these are not equidistant apart. So there are 2 that are closer together, and those are the bottom 2. And there's a reason for that, because there's this catch that's used to lock the dustbin in place. So that just sits back on top. Put our tip over safety back in place. And then I'm going to line these screw holes up as best I can. There are 4. And again, I'm going to be careful to not over tighten these. They just need to be barely snug. That's all. Put our filters back on. Actually, let's blow them out a little bit first. I've already done mine, but just to show you how to do it. Usually blow from the inside. Okay, now at this point, we can actually plug it back in and test it. Let's see how it sounds. All right guys, that is it. If you've got a shop vac and it's making a lot of noise or an unusual noise or a grinding awful noise, check it out first. It's not a huge effort. It might save you a whole lot of money and doesn't take a whole lot other than just a little bit of oil. Definitely worth checking it out first. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching, everybody. If this video was helpful to you, please remember to ring that bell, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Help me get more likes than Jay. It's easy. All you got to do, mash that button right there. Looks like a thumbs up. Check out our website, partscounterguru.com. You'll find our podcast and lots of other great videos and articles. Until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.